Good morning, church. I want to look at a verse in Matthew 14 today. Matthew 14, 28 and 29. Fascinating verse in my mind. It says, this is in the middle of a storm, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, raging storm, has all the disciples, including the disciples that are seasoned fishermen, sort of in a panic. Jesus is passing by them. If you remember, he's literally walking by them in the sea, in the storm. He cries out to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Matthew 14:28. Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." You guys know when I teach this at church, a lot of times I put it in southern lingo, "Come on, big boy, if you think you're all that." But I think Jesus literally just said, if you're going to choose that faith line, come on. So Peter got out of the boat. Here's verse 29. Peter got out of the boat and he walked on water and he came to Jesus. That's a fascinating verse. He got out of the boat and walked on water in the middle of a storm, in the middle of a crisis, in the midst of a raging storm. The Apostle Peter, seasoned fisherman from generations of fishermen, literally got out of the boat, threw all caution to the wind, no safety, nothing in mind, but just obedience to the scripture, to the word that Christ had spoken to him. So I listed a few things here that just trigger my mind as a devotional thought. There's a lot of deep stuff here. You can study this passage for years and keep finding deeper truths in it. But first of all, Peter knew Jesus' voice. When he heard Jesus on the water, he knew Jesus' voice. Secondly, he trusted Jesus' instructions. He literally trusted those instructions. And he ignored common sense and science that told him it's impossible to walk on water. He had to ignore some of his common sense. I'm not recommending you ignore common sense, by the way, not recommending you ignore science. But I'm telling you that when Jesus calls you to bigger things, there are times when it will not add up with what seems to be the right way to do things. I've seen people that the Lord told to give something away that was very valuable to them, very expensive, and they were not wealthy people. They just needed to let go of something. A lady in my church had to let go of some money she had saved to get a new vehicle and make a donation. The Lord told her to do it. I recommended she not do it because it didn't make sense to me for somebody with as much need as she had to let go of her savings, but she did, and God just magnificently blessed that moment in her life to a whole nother level. So Peter had to ignore common sense, ignore the science of it all. He had to ignore his inner fears. Clearly, there's a fear of getting out of a boat in a day when there's no Coast Guard, no rescue. There's not even any lights to find you once you go under. So he ignored his years of training as a sailor, as a seaman. Years of training had to be ignored. His father's advice to never leave a boat in a storm. All of that had to go away so he could do one thing, and that is to take Jesus up at his word and do what he was commanded to do. So my point is this morning, sometimes what Jesus asks us to do, especially when we indicate that we're willing and surrendered, it's what Peter's words sort of indicate to Jesus. Sometimes that's going to be difficult to imagine or believe it can happen until after we've obeyed and taken that first big step of faith. Peter had to put his foot over the bow of a boat that's crashing up and down in the waves and step out in faith to obey God. And then it says, so Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came to Jesus. So it's a beautiful part of the story. A lot of times we keep going and get to the part where Peter messed it all up, but don't forget the part where he didn't mess it up. He got it right. And let's learn from that as well. You guys be blessed. We'll see you back soon.